I'm here with Lonnie Ali at the Muhammad Ali Center. It was many months ago, or almost a year ago, that you guys were very kind to tell me you wanted to honor me. Little did we know that horrible circumstances were going to hit our world during these times, unleashed by the Hamas terror massacres on October 7th and the ensuing war that has brought an enormous amount of pain to Palestinians, Israelis, Jews, Muslims, Christians, people from all over the world. And so we decided that we would want to have a conversation a little bit, to talk a little bit beyond this moment about what is our role and responsibility and perspective of the times. So poor Lonnie, she's going to be the victim of what we call the Mexican Inquisition, where I ask a lot of questions. Do you mind if I jump with one of the most interesting things that I observed today?
Go right ahead.
So my son and I were at the Muhammad Ali Center and took a tour of the incredible museum and exhibits of Muhammad's life. And when we watched the movie, what first struck me is that the 13-minute summary documentary of Muhammad's life weaves in the poem If by Rudyard Kipling. It's a poem that was shared with me about 20 years ago, and I found it to be one of my favorite poems ever. And then I learned that the person behind it, Rudyard Kipling, is a bit controversial because he was British and he supported colonialism. And so a lot of people stopped teaching that poem, even though the poem itself is an incredibly powerful poem about the human condition. It's one of the best things that describes, I think, so many deep things. And I just wanted to get a feeling for whether you were aware of Rudyard Kipling's background and chose to use that as a teaching moment, because I think that video synthesizes so much about what our world needs to show the complexities of every human being, Muhammad included, my family included, every human being, right, is not perfect, but they can rise up to add so much light to the world. And how you think about those issues? Soft question to start with.
You know, I actually, when we put all of this together, it was a team of people doing it. And I was not honestly aware of Rudyard Kipling's background with his thoughts about colonialism. But even had I been, I would have still have chosen that poem because it is very significant and poignant to Muhammad's life. And sort of,
it tells
it tells the story. And I've always been of the belief that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't offer mercy, compassion, and redemption, even if a person's views differ from ours drastically, how are we ever going to advance as a civil society? How are we ever going to give people a second chance? When people come out of prison who may have murdered someone when they were 17, 15, 16, whatever, maybe they come out at 50. Are we still going to condemn that person? You know, they committed a horrible transgression, but we have to somehow find forgiveness. And I'm not going to sit here and act like it's easy for a lot of people, especially depending on what it was. It's very, very difficult and hard, and it tests probably every fiber of our humanity to try and find forgiveness for somebody so that we can move on and they can move on. But hopefully, with that exhibit of compassion, of kindness, of understanding, of giving them that second chance, a chance to renew and to redeem themselves, they can start a different life. They can, maybe do something even greater than they had ever imagined. So I believe in the power of forgiveness. My husband was one who forgave on sight. You could do something to him today, and he could find out about it tomorrow. And the minute after he finds out about it, he's already forgiven you. So he never carried that negative baggage forward. And I always say it's very hard to be Muhammad, and it is. But I believe that poem, If, would have been there regardless.
Yeah, and so much in what you said, I think one of the things that worries me the most about today's society is that we have not equipped all people, including our young people, but also us, with enough of that toolkit that you're describing about there's so much unforgiving judgmentalism, and we haven't taught people how to put themselves in other people's shoes, how to take perspective, and how to understand that we're all human beings here. And we talked a little bit about Muhammad and my father, and how my father also went through the Holocaust and was obviously going through a horrible situation, just like Muhammad went also through enormously difficult times of racism. And they both rose above that to just bring light to the world in spite of the very, very difficult circumstances and the injustices that they went through. And for me, one of the worries that I have is that social media is creating all these bubbles. What I'm seeing in my community of friends of Israel, of Jewish people, is the videos and the content that I'm seeing is just providing their narrative. And then because I work with Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims in the Middle East, I see their narrative. And they're different worlds, they're different facts. They don't see each other. And I'm very worried about how are you going to develop that empathy and that compassion if you don't understand where the other side comes from. Even though I consider myself educated, when I was walking through the hallways of the Muhammad Ali Center, I saw things about Muhammad's life that I wasn't aware of, that I hadn't been touched with. How he won a gold medal, came back to his own town after receiving
And threw it the river.
a parade, and then was told by a person that he would not serve him because he was black in his own town after being a hero for the United States. And it's important for us to take perspective, particularly those different from us. I think that's an important role that you've served and that the Muhammad Ali Center is serving, to try to transcend those differences. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work and your thoughts on this?
Well, first, let me say, Daniel, that the fact that your father could emerge from a horrendous, horrible, inhumane situation, such as a Nazi concentration camp, and to be liberated with the thought, once he walked past those awful gates, that we needed more kindness in the world. That gives me an immense amount of hope that maybe the possibility of getting through even the current situations might be possible. I don't know if they make them like your father and Muhammad and you anymore, but that is the kind of heart and mind and soul that we need, are like that. And that, I mean, it's just such a gift from God to have that kind of compassion, that kind of forgiveness in you. But here at the center, we follow Muhammad's model. His life is, the center is about his legacy, and we teach compassion. We have character education here that is exported through our online learning opportunities that can bring Muhammad to any classroom globally. Here at the center, we have workshops that we do, and that's done not only here within the center, but we have workshops that we call, that we do with local corporate partners. We have the Muhammad Ali Council of Students that teaches character education, leadership. So a lot of what we do here is modeled after Muhammad, trying to teach children not only just to believe in themselves and to achieve greatness, but to give back as well, because there's a service component to it, to all of it as well. And I think that is how we teach people about empathy and compassion, is through not only the power of the example of us as a parent, as a mother, as a grandmother, as an aunt, as an uncle, as a friend, but also actually engaging them in opportunities to give back, of service, because you never understand someone until you walk a mile in their shoes. That's sort of one of those cliche phrases we say all the time, but it holds so much truth, because there's no way for me to understand what it's like to live in a tenement house in a slum. There's no way for me to understand that unless I go and actually live there. I can hear people tell me their narratives, their stories. Till I experience it, it's going to be difficult. And that's why I think that that's one of the things that we have to do as adults, is to make sure, because we always think that compassion, kindness is something that children automatically understand, and they're born with it. And true enough, some of them are. I believe Muhammad was. Obviously, your father was. But There are those that are more compassionate than others. There's those that we need to teach, but I think it's something we need to do daily. It's
And I
something
think
that
all of us need to work extra hard given the
extra
times.
hard. You know, when children come home, I have a 3-year-old granddaughter, and to this day, and it sort of amazes me to sort of watch your son be a parent and your daughter-in-law, but every day she is a little bossy. You know, she's 3, she's a little bossy, independent, but they are on her every day about kindness. And if she is not kind to a classmate, you know, at 3, she is, you know, they talk to her. There's things that happen that, you know, she probably doesn't know it's punishment, but whatever. But, you know, they're trying to encourage her to be kind, to be nice to people, to be inclusive. And that's something we actively, intentionally have to do now. We may not have thought about it before. And I think a lot of it, Daniel, was before, you know, I was brought up Catholic. I went to Catholic school. So it was naturally given to me every day. I had a dose of it every day, 6 days a week, because I went to church on Sunday. And, you know, when people are brought up in church, you get that. I mean, you know, even if you were, you know, Presbyterian or Baptist, you were in church 3 or 4 times a week at choir practice, you know, Sunday school, something. But we don't have that anymore. People don't go to church. People don't, you know, go to their synagogues. And sometimes even in the mosque, you don't know what the message is anymore in the churches. You don't know what kind of message is being given. So it's up to us to do that, to have those engaging conversations with our children.
From a very early age.
From a very early
to
age.
actively teach empathy and
You're
kindness.
right. And ask them, what did you do today to help the world?
Let me ask you something tough on that front. But first, I just want to say, I've heard you already a few times talk about how amazing Muhammad was, and obviously he was like my father, an extraordinary figure. But when I was walking and talking to your team, they've told me about, and I've noticed that you have enormous strength and courage. And I just want to also acknowledge the leadership you've provided and you're providing, and the responsibility that comes for all of us during this time to unite and not allow forces of violent absolutism on either side to dehumanize the other. On that point, something that I found painful and interesting and understandable to observe is people feel like acknowledging the pain from the other side might reduce their moral clarity. Like people on the Israeli side that are horrified by the massacre that Hamas committed feel that they don't want to acknowledge the pain that Palestinian civilians are going through in Gaza. And vice versa, Palestinians might feel like acknowledging the humanity of the Israelis and their suffering and the trauma that they went through might weaken their moral claim. From my experience, it's quite the opposite, that we actually are stronger when we not just acknowledge each other, but have compassion towards the other side. I noticed in Muhammad's journey that first he needed to break the shackles of slavery and change his name. Then he needed to represent the injustices that his people had gone through. But then he became a global figure for humanity overall. I'm just curious if you can share what you observed about his journey and your journey that made you become concerned about building humanity for all of us.
Well, first, let me say that, and you may not know this, I met Muhammad when I was 6.
I saw the picture.
Yeah, and he was, but no, I wasn't his age. He was 22. I was 6. And from the moment I met that man, it was clear to me, even as a child, I didn't know what it was because I was a child, but grew to understand that he really had the hand of God on him. So he didn't become that humanitarian. He may have been given a bigger platform to exhibit that, but that heart was there. That heart was there. And that's why I say, you know, your father was young. That heart was there before. So that's why I say they had the hand of God on them. But as he got more famous, he traveled, and that's extremely important, because if you do not understand and visit and experience other people, other cultures, all you know is what people tell you, you know, and people had told him things, you know, he was actually been told that, you know, he didn't know that there were Muslims who were white, you know, he didn't know that until he traveled. And because he was able to travel, he got to experience other people, other cultures. And having traveled with him, I can tell you, wherever Muhammad's foot set down, he was home. Those were his brothers, those were his sisters. He immediately became one with them. And that's just who he was. But the platform that his boxing gave him just gave him an opportunity to have a louder amplifier. And remember, he did all of this prior to social media. He did this one by one, one person at a time, and by the power of his example. So he was always like that, and he always was encouraging not only to me, but to his children, especially about looking after people who do not have. I mean, sometimes I have to tell you, Muhammad would test, I'm Muhammad's fourth wife, and Muhammad could really test his second and third wives. This is the truth. You have to be honest with the people he would bring home from God knows where. It's the truth. Everybody knew that if you went to his house, in LA he had a guard gate, and all the guard had to do was call the house and tell Muhammad somebody was out there and wanted to see him. Come in. Come in. Come in. He didn't care. And people on the street, they might be home for dinner. You never knew. And this was something that you really had to accept because that was who he was. But he passed that on to his children. Not so much teaching them every day, but through the power of his example every day. They saw that. And of course, he would have those talks about, you got to take care of people who don't have. He used to teach us that if you have food to put in your mouth, a cot to sleep on, and a roof over your head, you have more than most people in the world. So be grateful.
You remind me of my mom's father, my grandfather on my mom's side, who was a rancher. He also immigrated from Eastern Europe, but then immigrated to Mexico. And he would take the shirt off his back to give it to his fellow cattlemen and just would share everything, and a story of a lot of humility. One thing that we discovered when you joined the Starts With Us movement that we're both a part of to try to amplify curiosity, compassion, and the courage to work across lines of difference. And when we connected, I reminded you, because you didn't remember when we connected, that Muhammad Ali had joined, or you say Muhammad Ali, had joined our board and the One Voice movement, where we started building this movement to empower Israelis and Palestinians to break the shackles of extremism and build a movement to try to resolve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the Arab-Israeli conflict more broadly. One thing that I've noticed is that, again, people with a violent absolutist vision are radicalizing us all towards this extremism, and it actually hurts the people that it proclaims to represent, because the people on the ground don't have the luxury for an absolutist vision that's going to deny the other side's humanity and then keep us in an eternal war. They want a resolution of the conflict. And when Muhammad Ali joined One Voice, it was for very, very courageous stance towards seeing how can we come up with a negotiated resolution to this conflict. Do you remember at all his take on how does he see the issue of extremism? Is it more important to try to convert extremists into moderates, or is it more important to activate moderates into builders by making them take action? Or is that a very unfair question to ask of you? Because it's a complex question.
No, it's not fair at all. Muhammad was a moderate about everything. Extremism, and I don't care on whose side and for what, is going to cause society ills. I mean, we see it here in America in our political system. It causes a lot of disruption and unrest, and it creates a sense of insecurity, and people, become afraid. And mistrust. We mistrust people. But Muhammad, like I said, Muhammad was fortunate to travel so much. And Muhammad went to Israel, and he went to the West Bank. And Muhammad was celebrated in both, So he didn't care. He could care less who you were and where you came from or what you believed. You were human. You were part of God's humanity, and he saw that. And I think he would have felt that it would be better to spend your energy with those moderates, to embolden them, to encourage them. give them the platforms to speak up, because the more you do, they become the people that the children want to emulate. In fact, that was one of the things we were trying to do after 9/11, was try to figure out how can we somehow make Muhammad, because Muhammad's a global icon, make him the person that these little 6 and 7-year-olds look up to in the Middle East, not someone like Osama bin Laden, correct?
Yeah.
And we were trying to figure that out, and how we could export that. And fortunately, that's one of the wonderful things about this online classroom, this virtual classroom that we have. We can take Muhammad into classrooms everywhere where they can learn the power of his
I
example.
want to learn more, and I want to help with that. I think that's something we need to scale up, because we
Yeah.
don't, right now, again, social media is radicalizing
Yes.
everybody in their own echo chambers to believe that they're the righteous and the other side is a monster. And it's just not providing us that compassion and that ability to walk in other people's shoes. And it's very dangerous. When I started with my partner, Mohammad Daraushe, One Voice, our perspective was that we needed to make sure people understood and didn't frame the conflict wrong. It was not Israelis versus Palestinians or Jews versus Muslims. It was moderates versus extremists. But the problem with moderates versus extremists, even though moderates are the overwhelming majority of people, 86 to 97%, depending how you define moderation, it's a very, very small percentage that are extremists. But extremists wake up in the morning and they think, how can I advance my cause? Moderates wake up in the morning and they think, what can I have for breakfast? And the problem with that is that it ends up allowing extremists here in the United States and across the world to hijack the conflict and to hijack our lives. And you see that, like you said, in our lives here in the United States, in our politics, in the States, and globally, it's a very big problem. And social media is amplifying that danger of scandalizing and giving more voice to extremism. Only in the last 3-4 weeks, I started learning that the way we win is by turning moderates into builders. Because extremists are going to be active into being destroyers. Moderates need to be builders. Muhammad was a builder. He was a builder. Every day he was bringing light. He was uniting, bringing light, and trying to build a better future for the world. Do you have any tip for people that might be listening on how do we get people to understand that it's not enough to be a moderate, that they need to take action to in their everyday lives to treat people the way Muhammad treated human beings, in everyday lives to try to be committed to building bridges?
Well, to answer that question first, it's like you said, your grandfather was a farmer. And the way you get a crop is you plant a seed and you cultivate it. You give it water, it gets the sun, you give it fertilizer, and it grows. That's what moderates have to do. We have to plant the seed, not only with ourselves, with our children, our friends, our relatives. We have to give it that fertilizer, that nurturing, so that it will grow, so that there will be more. Instead of having a few saplings, you'll have a forest. Because that's what extremists are doing, right? They are getting up every morning with the intentional idea that I am going to further my cause. So they are planting seeds, they are cultivating, nurturing, and growing. And they do that, as you said, on social media. And Daniel, it gets even more complicated with AI. So it almost becomes that thing like, don't believe your lying eyes, because what you see may not be true, because there are deep fakes and people are influenced. In fact, I wonder what would happen, during COVID when no one was driving around, how clear the earth got, right? All the smog and everything sort of dissipated. I wonder what would happen if we could get rid of social media
Oh my God.
for 1 year, 1 month.
I'd pay
I mean,
so much for that.
But technology continues to advance, and it becomes. I don't know if we have to legislate it, but these owners of high-tech internet companies that push out these algorithms of people who are in the media, who push out falsehoods, who misrepresent truth, give us false facts, and amplify it. There has to be some kind of legislation about that. You can't walk into a theater and yell fire, right?
Yeah.
So somehow, but we have to have people who are willing to do that, because right now we don't, because people are so self-absorbed for power, for money, for their own glory. And I think that's part of why we see the division we see and the extremism we see in Congress.
I think we definitely need to have legislative efforts to overcome the divisions that social media is sowing. We also need to do, you said, like to educate our children to be more compassionate, to be more critical thinkers, and all of us need to do the painful work of. My friend Fred Chaffel wrote to me about this today. You need to go into the bubbles to understand what the other side is going through. You need to go to each of the bubbles of the opposing side to better understand, because when I look at the videos of the suffering of my Palestinian friends, that none of my Jewish friends is seeing, it makes me understand what they're going through. When I see the videos of my Jewish friends and my Israeli friends, it makes me understand what they're going through. And unless you understand what each side is seeing, you have no chance to do that. We also need to find a way to build bridges between our communities. Like, how do you see, as a Muslim leader, how do you feel about what's going on? Do you think that there's hope that Jews, Muslims, Christians in the United States and globally can unite to overcome the hate? What advice would you give everybody that's listening to us and seeing us work together about how we need to unite together?
Well, as a Muslim, and I'm not a Muslim leader, but as a Muslim, I'd say inshallah, with the grace of God, because that's what it's going to take. If we want to continue to have a civil society, global society, and coexist, we're going to have to do this. It's not maybe or okay, someday. No, we're going to have to address this, as you say, intentionally and actively every day to make this division that has deepened in some instances and make us come together. You know, I just don't get it. I mean, as an individual, I just don't get why it's so hard for people to love somebody, and maybe if you're not just loving them, just show them a little mercy. Just give people a little mercy, right? A little compassion, a little kindness, because that's the way we were taught as children. And if you can extend that to people, it would just go on so far. One of the things we do here at the center, we have a commission on civility and compassion. And we have narrowed our focus, because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel with what a lot of other people were doing, is we want to have a civility and compassion index where we go into localities, communities, and measure that compassion in that community and score it, measure it, and score it.
And then do interventions and encourage them.
Not only that, post it where it becomes, Americans are very competitive. Who can be the most compassionate city? Who is the most compassionate city, right?
Yeah.
You have to, it's crazy. You have to do these tricks, play these games, but it's what's important, because it makes people realize. You remember when Lady Bird Johnson, you may not have, that might be before you kind of.
Well, I know who she was, but I was born in '68.
Okay, because she had this campaign about Make America Beautiful, right? To keep people from throwing litter all over the streets and the highways, whatever. Make America Beautiful. And it caught on, right? So that's what we have to do. We have to do, and you have your campaign starts with us. But the Compassion and Civility Index, I think, will who is the most compassionate? And it becomes competitive with cities. Nobody wants to be labeled the least compassionate, because when you're talking about where you want to raise your family, where you want to raise your children, would you want them in a neighborhood, in a city that did not show compassion?
Yeah, and kindness. I do understand. I've seen it. I've been studying this for 30 years. I do understand why, when conflict happens, all of us have the most empathy towards our side and become tribal. But what we need to educate ourselves and others is that that's not enough, because ultimately extremists want to radicalize all of us, turn us versus them, and that's going to be the end of society. And these forces of social media are really, really powerful. And so we really need to work very hard to understand that. The reason I have a lot of hope, actually, even though the last month I've had a very heavy heart, but the reason why I have a lot of hope, and I really, really do, is the numbers. Actually, people are aghast at seeing the division. But when you actually look at it, it's a very small number of people that are ultra radicalized with spewing that hatred. It's just that social media makes it sound like cable news makes it sound that represent everybody. But in fact, in a college campus that has 17,000 students, there's 8 students that engage in horrible actions. There's 200 students that are misguided, and then there's 16,900 students or 16,800 students that are like aghast at this division. And this moment reminds me when we founded the One Voice movement, Muhammad Darwish and I, is a moment of enormous importance because it's a moment where all of us have very heavy hearts. All of us are shocked at the hatred, at the suffering and the pain, but all of us are mobilizable. And apathy is a very dangerous element in society. And at these moments where people are mobilizable, they need to mobilize to partner to build bridges with us. So I know we have your event probably already starting. So I
We're
want to end with a
fine.
very funny
We're
story.
fine.
Okay, good. But I want to tell you a funny story when you were saying about Lady Bird. About 3 weeks ago, I was coming to New York, and my friend Jose Andres, the chef, was going to have an event with Bono. And I know I mispronounced it, it's Bono, the singer. And I called my son, I'm like, isn't it cool that I'm going to get to see Bono? He's like one of my favorite music performers. I'm like, wait, you don't know who Bono is? And my son was like clueless. So I called my assistant, Kayla, and I'm like, Kayla, isn't it funny? Because she was helping me schedule the meetings. Isn't it so funny that my son had no idea who's Bono? Wait, Kayla, you don't know who's Bono? It's like, yeah, wasn't he one of the Beatles?
Oh
I'm
no,
like,
she
my
did
God.
not. One of Muhammad's favorites too.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that Muhammad Ali, my children all knew who he is. He is really such a global icon that I hope that we're going to be able to have his spirit live on as a role model for the future.
Inshallah. You know what, Daniel, when you talk about the disruption and the protest on college campuses has shocked me as well. Not the fact that they protest, but they're so one-sided. They're sort of misinformed.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, would it be possible for universities, as a part of the responsible action to educate children, especially children in college have more open minds, that they have to understand what they're protesting about?
Yeah.
When you protest for Palestinian rights, that's one thing, but that does not mean that you should dislike Jewish people because you want Palestinian rights. It's just like when we have an election here with Democrats and Republicans, because, you know, Democrats tend to go more towards social services and that thing. That does not mean because we want that we have to demonize and hate Republicans, right? So I'm wondering if maybe that before you can go out there and participate in a protest,
You have to educate.
you have to educate and understand why you're out there.
Yeah, I've been working on this issue a lot. I love that you said that history is not properly being taught anymore. I think we need to educate kids and make sure that they understand history. Humanity and compassion and forgiveness need to be taught. And also, we have thousands, hundreds of thousands of Israelis and Palestinians that have joined our movement over the last 20 years. They're going to go to the campuses. And Ezeldin Masri, who lived in Gaza and who's fought for peace, is going to go and explain, you're not helping me.
Right.
You're not helping me when you come up with these absolutist visions, because out of the luxury of your college campus, you can say those things, but then you're condemning me to an eternal war. The people in Gaza, they don't want Hamas to
That's
rule.
right.
The
That's
people
right.
in Israel need to break the shackles of extremists. Everybody needs to work for a better future for both peoples, or else both peoples are going to be condemned. And I do think we need to bring a lot of these leaders to those college campuses. Lonnie, it's a very big honor to be here with you today. Comes at one of the most important times. I look forward to working very hard with you to build bridges for all of our communities, for the United States and for the world. I'm so touched that we're able to work together. I wish my father and Muhammad Ali were here to be with us. But
They
we need
are
to
in
follow in their
spirit, believe me.
footsteps and do that work in their honor.
Thank you, Daniel. And it's a pleasure to be here with you, to honor you, and I guess we can never rest. We can't sit on our laurels. We have work to do.
Yeah. and we need to have a little bit of laughter and joy because
Yes.
this is hard work.
But you know, Muhammad was a big jokester.
Yes.
A big
And
jokester.
when I met him, he started showing me magic, and I'm a magician since I'm 8 years old, and he taught me how to levitate, and we did a couple of things together. It was a very touching moment for me.
Yeah, Muhammad was, he loved to entertain people and make people smile and laugh, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's another way to the heart.